Hello, everyone. We are very excited to welcome two distinguished guests, Ed Orlet and Satya Sanivarapu with NAED to the Driven Show. I'm really excited today to have a conversation with them, talk about NAED, how they are helping the distribution world. So Ed and Satya, welcome to the Driven Show. We are very excited and thankful to have you join us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you again for joining. So why don't we dive right in and get started with Ed? Ed, you are the Senior Vice President and Acting CEO of NAED. So thankful for you joining the Driven Show. Can you tell us, for audience who are new and who do not know anything about NAED, what is NAED and how do you guys help?
Yeah, happy to. So NAED stands for National Association of Electrical Distributors, and NAED has been around for more than 100 years. We're the trade association for the electrical wholesaling industry that is, depending on who you talk to, between 150 and 160 billion dollars in annual revenue. We represent employees and business people serving more than 5,000 locations across the United States, and we do have some international members. Our members come to us primarily for networking, employee education, and industry news and standards.
That's awesome. I didn't know NAED was over 100 years old, and thanks for that. So I'm sure there's a lot of experience that gets passed on, and you're able to pass it on to distributors, and that's great. Thank you. And Satya, you're the technology director at NAED. How did you get involved in NAED? You have extensive experience in technology and supply chain. How did you get involved in NAED?
I keep saying the universe has its way to play with everything, and I think a lot of things had to happen in sequence for me to be here. Firstly, NAED's decision to be remote and throw out that net further wide across the country for talent, and then myself spending many years at the confluence of business and technology in the supply chain domain. For me, it was mostly about increasing my circle of influence. I worked for profit in the CPG industry, retail, technology, shipping, and always your scope of influence, a circle of influence is within the organization. And for the first time, I had the opportunity to impact an industry across the board and to help their digital journey. And I thought my skill sets coming into play into a wide arena consisting of many hundreds of companies embarking on this journey. So that seemed like a very value propositional thing that attracted me. So that's how I got into it.
Oh, that's great. Distributed work enabled Satya to join NAED, and that's great. And also working with a purpose where you're able to impact an industry, that's really well said. So Ed, I want to get back to you because dealing with the government is not easy, and you have done that for a long time. You have been handling government affairs at NAED, and now you are the acting CEO of the organization. How did you get to where you are today? You have extensive experience with NAED. Can you walk us through your career journey and some of your learnings there?
Sure. So once upon a time, I was a struggling sales rep for a St. Louis-based industrial supply house. And as struggling sales reps do, I was looking for a job. I would still have my job, but was looking for something I might be better at. And I came across NAED, and I think not a lot of people, first of all, not a lot of people know what associations are. Second of all, not a lot of people know what distributors are that aren't in the business. And so I knew what both were because I had a background in state legislative work. So I knew what associations were because I work with lobbyists all the time, and not in the way you think. Lobbyists are actually very valuable information resources for legislative staff. It's not all golf trips and entertaining that they do. They do play a really valuable role in the legislative process. But anyway, that's how I knew what associations were. I was hired 22 years ago as a membership person. And over the decades, I've stuck around in a variety of capacities. We have a board member that jokes that they keep changing my job till they find something I'm good at. But yeah, I've worked all around the organization, and I'm keeping the seat warm while they conduct the national search for a permanent CEO. So in the meantime, we got a great team, a lot of experience, and so I'm trying to stay out of their way and just support them to keep things running, keep things moving along. And also very excited to have Satya on board. He and I have been working together quite a bit over the last month or so to help him get into the industry and become a part of it. he already has, in my opinion, a really good grasp of what the big issues are that our members are facing. And he's going to be an incredible resource for our industry.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Ed. I was watching some of your interviews and you rightly talked about purpose and more. So can you walk us through what's the mission of NAED? How do you guys really help? Let's say I'm an electrical distributor. Why should I become a member of the NAED and how can you help?
So we say our mission is to be a trusted source for tools and resources that help our members own their customer relationships. And, that may not mean a lot to folks who aren't in distribution, but when you're part of a channel, especially in the day of omni-channel, the age of omni-channel, owning that customer relationship is critical for a distributor, being the value, being the link. And so, our sell to our members is a trusted source of those tools. And right now, I don't know that there's a bigger investment in our industry being made than digital capabilities. And I don't know that there's been this big an investment in a long time. And it's not traditionally been something that, has been critical and central to the way we do business. We say we're a relationship industry and people buy from people they like, right? But so there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of catching up and learning that has to be done. And it's a perfect place for an association because we can bring together the best minds in the industry to kind of answer some of those questions and help our members get farther along faster. One of the reasons why Satya is here is our foundation board said, we want to do something that would probably take us 10 years. We want to do it in like 2. So it's like a flywheel effect that we're trying to do. We've historically taken on big issues within distribution, within electrical distribution for us, but the stakes are real high.
Great. So that's great. Thank you, Ed. And going back to Satya, you talked about making a difference in the industry. And what do you hope to accomplish with NAED in the coming years? What is your mission for NAED?
So as I saw, NAED plays a central role in bringing together the entire industry, providing educational resources, as well as it's a platform to push standardization across the industry, to also push best practices, because there are a variety of companies at different maturity levels, and it serves as a catalyst to pass on the learnings from one maturity level company to another. And I think NAED is here to catalyze that. Now, in my short journey here so far, a little over a month, and looking at the industry from an outside perspective, I see we've talked about consolidation being a game changer now over the last few years in this industry, and with a few large players and a long tail of small players. And there is a need for these companies, and there's a inherent desire to digitize and use digital tools. And the period of COVID seemed to have accelerated that need and shown that requirement for the industry to adapt. As I see it, this role here, this seat, is here to form a bridge between the members, who are primarily distributors, family companies, or member-owned companies, and on the other side, you have a whole new segment of players, the technologists, like your organization, who are here to provide solutions using the latest technologies like AI and machine learning, and data analytics and data science, application of data science. And I see these two groups needing a translator. And in essence, I'm that translator who understands both the business side of it from a supply chain standpoint, as well as the technology aspect of it. And that's how I'm looking to catalyze this environment and adoption of technology for the benefit of the industry.
That's awesome. So let's say an electrical distributor has a question in terms of, hey, how do we propel this forward? Or what kind of technology do I really need to use? Then they come to an NAED and you would help answer that question.
Yes. As part of the background, what we're doing right now is over the next few months, we're segmenting the members based on their characteristics of the organization, based on their corporate strategy, based on the maturity in terms of digital adaption of tools. And on the other side, we're also segmenting the technology providers. Which areas are they playing in? It could be integration, it could be automating certain business processes, it could be product data, which is so key in this domain. Now, what I'm trying to do, what my team is trying to do in this space, is to validate and so to speak, separate the wheat from the chaff. Because there's a lot of marketing content floating around, and members, distributors get hundreds of emails every week. And what this group's role is to help the members identify who are the top vendors to play in a particular space, and to also look at the members' business and to see where the gaps are. It could be automating a business process. It could be adding a new tool which will help them manage a process better, or optimize something, identify a pattern. So to meet their need and to recommend them certain technology companies through the preferred provider program, that's one of the key aspects what we're doing. So in summary, segmenting the members, segmenting the technology companies, and forming these matches between both the groups is the approach we're taking to enable this.
That's great, Satya. So you talked about segmenting members, and Ed, I have a question on that to you. So talking about segmenting customers or segmenting members, is there a limit on how many members you can take into an NAED? Let's say, are you capped out? Or because when I was talking to distributors, one concern I did have is, hey, we are already a lot of people, why should we add more people or other things? Because some of these distributors also compete with each other. How do you deal with that?
Well, they all compete with each other. That's the nature of an association. And we want everybody. The reality is the pace of consolidation in this industry means our membership numbers continue to consolidate as well, right? So the industry, when I know Sonia Coleman's involved in helping us put this podcast together, and we used to work together at NAED many years ago, and we were just kind of reminiscing. And when we started, there were just a lot of mom and pop businesses, hundreds and hundreds of mom and pop businesses. Over the generations, maybe the next third generation or fourth generation doesn't want to be in the family business. Maybe by the fourth generation, the family in the family business gets pretty big. There's a lot of mouths to feed. For whatever reason, we see companies selling to consolidators, to other companies, doing ESOPs, selling to the employees. So the industry is consolidating so rapidly. We've got all kinds of room, and we want everybody here. The great thing about NAED is almost all of the industry leaders are there at our events and within our membership. And I think that's we have the heft of the industry, but we do also want the breadth of the industry as well.
If I may just add one more aspect. So as I'm looking at it, as I look at the distribution industry, there is a need and a want, as I mentioned before, to digitize. And while they compete with each other, they do realize that this is more of a journey to go along with, only because digital is new for everybody. And from that standpoint, one company's learnings could be very beneficial for another. And together, they want to expand the value-added services that they're offering today, because they see that as one key area how distributors can make themselves more relevant in this space. And the customer is demanding that value-added services at the end of it. It could be the construction industry or the utilities or the industrial segment. And distributors see digital tools and solutions as key for expanding that value-added services. So I think there is consensus that they all should work together, because this is a new arena filled with minds, and they want to work together to take this journey to cross the bank, really, to cross the river, really, to the other bank.
Yeah, work together and learn together and progress together. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, Ed, you talked about consolidation that's happening in the industry, and it's getting smaller for a variety of reasons. So what do you think is the biggest challenge for electrical distributors today, and how is NAED helping overcome that challenge?
Yeah, in the 22 years that I've been involved in the industry. There are a lot more folks that have been involved a lot longer than I have, obviously, but I haven't seen any time like this. And it's sort of a tale of two cities, the best of times, worst times kind of thing. Because if you think about where we are demographically, it's just in the workforce, generally speaking, we've got customer facing people retiring at a rapid pace. Think about all that relationship equity that's been built up for decades. And, they want to go right off into the sunset and go golf and fish and do whatever they want to do and enjoy the fruits of their labor, right? And who could blame them? At the same time, we've got that generational turnover in our customers purchasing people. So again, those relationships are threatened. And at the same time, the statistics or the research says that the next generation of buyer has a very different expectation of their interaction with the seller, whether it be a personal seller or just self-service, right? So the whole dynamic is evolving, shifting right now. At the same time, those customers have a proliferation of sources for material, more than I've seen in the past, right? You can buy material anywhere from a lot of different places, not just electrical distributors, right? Industrial supplies, online, e-tailers, and all that kind of stuff. And there's just a lot of sources. So there's a lot of challenges there. But at the same time, the economy is going through this period of electrification. So the scope of that opportunity is unprecedented. So while we face these challenges, there's also this incredible opportunity in front of us. We need the people to make this stuff, to move this stuff, and to install this stuff, because we're going to sell a lot of it. We have the opportunity to sell a lot of it. And at the same time, we're kind of shorthanded in all these different places. Our contractors never have enough help. We can always use more skilled help. And obviously the manufacturing as well, because we're starting to see things either reshored or nearshored from all the supply chain difficulties we had during COVID. So there's these interesting sort of strange dichotomies everywhere. There's a huge amount of opportunity and some tremendous challenges at the same time.
No, that's great. I was watching one of your interviews where you talked about the new opportunities which are being created with EVs, which you mentioned right now. So that's really, really good, because I'm really thinking that, hey, there's a lot of new opportunity right now for electrical distribution industry, and NAED can even help point the distributors in the right direction. Hey, there's a whole new EV market. How can we be doing better? Anything you want to add on the EV space? I know you were a little skeptical about EV a little earlier, but then you started believing in it. And again, we're still a long ways out. But one thing which fascinated me is, hey, it's a new market which did not exist, let's say, a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I think, okay, so I have been skeptical about not necessarily the viabilities of electric vehicles in the long run, but sort of the goals that are being set for adoption and for rollout. And there's also just a lot of nagging questions about the availability of the materials and minerals that are needed to make some of these batteries, what we do with the batteries when they're spent, what you do with a bad battery when you're the car owner. There's a lot of questions there that I hopefully we can answer. But what kind of turned me around was the conversation. Plus I was thinking, well, all these charging stations and who's installing them, who's maintaining them, are they going direct? Is this going through supplies? How's that working? But when I was educated about the scope of the opportunity from the charger to the grid to stuff we already sell and we know how to sell well, right? That kind of that was my aha moment. And I was like, it's not about, okay, the chargers are fine and the EVs are fine. But if the infrastructure is going to be built out, it's going to have a ton of stuff we already do well. And so to me, that was where I kind of turned around on the whole thing. I said, okay, somebody else is going to have to solve for the availability of the materials to make this stuff. And somebody else is going to have to figure out what we do with it when it's done, when it's at its end of life. Well, let somebody else figure that out. For now, the money's going to be spent. We might as well go get it.
Yeah, unlearning is an important aspect of learning, and thanks, great insights. I appreciate that. So Satya, talking about digital transformation for distributors, and electrical distribution industry in general. What insights do you have to share for the electrical distribution industry? Because sometimes technology investments could be large. And I was also reading your research report where you talked about what are the priorities for distributors. Hey, ERP stand first. And then you also talked about the talent management systems. So where do you think a distributor should focus? Can you share some insights for the electrical distribution industry? Hey, let's say we want to make some technology investments. So how do we better our technology? What advice would you share?
Yes. So one of the big challenges for this industry is change management. And as leaders of this, distribution leaders, as they are looking to make this shift, obviously the demographics that consist of employees in these companies is changing. We're seeing a younger workforce come on. With that, some of that that inertia will be broken. But it's one thing to want to go digital, and it's a whole new thing to get your workforce to adapt to it. So that's where they're having the right talent, being able to start using these tools, not see it as a daunting task, because usually past experiences for these companies, in the traditional client server architecture, where if you had to embark on a software implementation, it would be a multi-year rollout with multi-million dollars of spend. And then by the time you're done with the implementation, you're ready for an upgrade. So it's a continuous investment, large-scale investment to get into any such space. But that has changed with how software has evolved and the delivery of software has changed. Today, software as a service, the software tools are a lot more accessible. So having that mindset change for these organizations, for these leaders, to suddenly realize that embarking on a digital journey, adapting or adopting a software is not really a daunting task, but it could be something that can be tried and tested out with the cloud model, with cloud computing, and on-demand license-based usage. Supply chain departments, teams could try and test out different tools before they settle in. So to re-educate, like you said, the unlearning of the old methodology and the relearning of how it can be done today is one big aspect of it for leaders, and to retalent, to reskill their workforce, and to have the workforce have an open mind towards it. Well, I've seen many scenarios where the tools are there, the technology is there, but there are no users. It doesn't serve the purpose. So I'd say that change management in this industry is very key.
That's great. I mean, as you know, we do a lot of work in the integration space, and distributors having multiple systems. It's very important for these systems to talk to each other. Do you have any advice you would offer to distributors there in terms of data flow automation, how these different systems, ERPs, e-commerce, CRMs, talking to each other? Why is that critical, and why does that matter?
It all comes down to the omni-channel experience that we are so used to in the consumer space, the B2C consumer space, and that's kind of rubbing off in the B2B industry. So from that standpoint, if you look at the electrical industry, you have construction forming a big segment, you have the industrial and the utilities. And if you see the construction customers, they're not demanding the digital change. They are continuing to operate the way they have through relationship with the sales reps from the distribution companies. And they want a go-to person to purchase something from. But unlike the digital revolution, the consumer side, where everyone has a mobile phone, and therefore there's a need for apps. So it's more of a pull system, and this is more of a push system in the electrical industry, where distributors are seeing the need to go digital and push that downstream. So from that standpoint, it's a different dynamics, and how leaders adapt to this change in this industry, to adapt technology, is key in their future. And it's very important to align the corporate strategy with the company. Needs to know where they want to be, and their digital investments should be proportionate to that desire to be where they want to be 5 years, 10 years down the road. So having that clarity and accordingly making these investments across these domains is key to their journeys.
Yeah, integrated commerce is the future. Really well said, Satya. Satya, I have a question on software costs. Because when you talk to distributors, they are not really used to a yearly licensing cost. They would like to essentially pay it for one time. they don't really like recurring costs, right? Because the margins in the distribution industry are really, really thin. They want to avoid this as much as possible. Any advice you would give them? Because pretty much everything is changing to licensing model right now. So any advice you would give them?
Yes. So I mean, as you mentioned previously, integration so key for that omni-channel experience, and with digital today allowing for these APIs, API connectors, which is really the language between two entities. Here, you're talking about two software systems needing to talk to each other. Today, technology as companies are giving these API connectors, which allow for this integration to happen very easily, unlike in the past. So, and the SaaS model of delivery of these services, be it integration, be it automation, be it transactional as the ERP or CRM or the analytics as well. It's all been commoditized through SaaS. So with that, the way you start using technology has changed, unlike in the past. You don't need to have a server on site. You don't need to maintain it. You don't need to worry about upgrades. So all this in the evolution of client server technology, the first step was the infrastructure as a service, meaning the servers, the hardware being outsourced, and then the platform, the OS and the platform of coding, .NET or Java being outsourced. And finally, the third step in the evolution, the software as a service. So we've seen this evolution, and all this has been possible with advances in cloud computing and faster data transfer speeds, now with 5G, now with edge computing. So the rapid pace, but not to be considered as daunting again, because tools have become much more accessible, much more than was possible previously. That would be the big shift in thinking for these leaders, for these companies.
Yeah, change is the only thing that's constant. Thank you, Satya. That's a good segue into my next question to you. And NAED did an amazing research, a really good research on building a connected business. And it is a 300 plus page research report. And I also learned that the market size of the electrical construction industry is about $170 billion, which is huge. And there are new opportunities being created. What were some of the key learnings from that research?
Yeah, and I guess this may sound a little repetitive, but the journey kind of begins. The foundation really relies on accurate and complete product, customer, and pricing data. I kind of feel like new economy companies really treat data as a valuable asset. And I think that that's something we're still learning to treat our data that way. I think our leading companies have been moving in that direction, and they're looking at their data strategically. And I think that, again, that's why Satya is going to be such a valuable resource for our members. He totally gets this, and he talked about translating earlier, and he does. He has a real knack for kind of putting this in terms that people understand. The research that we have produced so far was meant to inform our members' journey again, but it's sort of static research that we did a few years ago. What we're hopeful is that as we continue to invest in our members' journeys on digital transformation, that we can keep that information more updated and make it more dynamic versus a 300 and something page report, which again was great. And I know a couple people that literally read it cover to cover. But it's the way this stuff is changing so rapidly. It's our challenge to kind of figure out how to continue to present this information in a really fresh and quickly responsive way to the industry. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we plan on investing hundreds of thousands of dollars more. That investment begins with Satya, who's essentially kind of running a startup within NAED, and we're thrilled that he's there with us.
Definitely. I did find that research helpful, especially, let's say if I'm a distributor, dependent on what I need or what my problem is. There's a lot of different options you provide for distributors out there. I'm just curious, how often do you guys do a research like this, and how many, do you do that often, or how many reports does NAED produce every year?
So historically, and again, I'm going to get the year wrong, but it was early in my time at NAED, we actually created a research endowment. Leading companies in the industry donated hundreds of thousands of dollars each to fund an endowment to continue to do this research. It used to be that we do 2 or 3 projects a year, and they weren't necessarily related. They certainly weren't related to digital transformation. We used to do a lot of things on theft and fraud, on reverse logistics, special pricing, SPAs. We've done a lot of different things, but in the last few years, we've really focused and prioritized this digital journey because of all the money that's being invested by our members. We want to help them invest it wisely and make good decisions. But now I think we're also looking at other areas because we do feel like there are larger issues that we need to look at. And I personally have got some interest in doing some public policy type research. We're thinking, we talked earlier briefly about workforce and how we really need to develop our next generation of employees and leaders. And it's something NAED is invested in with the leadership development program, a lot of employee training and education. But also from a public policy perspective, I don't think we have a real handle on how we're going to treat work differently in the future, because it's kind of happening to us now. And we don't, we have this sort of leftover 20th century, 1920s labor industrial relations model to our public policy that doesn't even make sense much anymore. And the policy leaders are not coming up with creative ways to address how people are going to work in this new economy. So it's something that I personally would like to see us invest a little bit in. But we'll continue to primarily, it's what our members tell us are their priorities, is that's where we go.
Great. We need a lot of help in public policy. So thanks, Ed. A couple of last questions. So can you talk about some of your failures? What is your biggest failure and what is that you learned from it in your career journey?
Who's starting here?
We'll start with you, Ed.
Okay. I love talking about my failures. We could do a whole podcast on my failures. I guess the biggest thing is I've learned the hard way that the most effective leaders need to think of themselves as servants to their team. And I think ego can get in the way. For me personally, I'll say ego can get in the way of me being my most effective leader. And it's a challenge to have the self-awareness to realize how others do see you, right? And I've worked on it a lot, but you may think you're being collaborative and supportive, and others may still not see it that way. And I've taken plenty of lumps to see that. And it's something I have to keep top of mind every day because it's always going to be a challenge for me.
No, great. Always be serving other people. And that's really well said. That was very, very interesting. So thanks, Ed. And Satya.
All right. So I'll talk about specific projects. I was working for a CPG company where we spent a couple of years and a few $1 million on relationships, partnering with a data science organization. At the end of it, the objective of this engagement was to create visibility in the supply chain, all the way from manufacturing to the retail stores, and to have the stocks and the flows between all these entities in the supply chain. It involved a lot of data harmonization from across multiple systems, bringing them all together and harmonizing and normalizing the data so they can be consumed, with an objective being to democratize data across the departments, functions of the company. A couple of years down the line, as I went through this journey, we realized we built a great tool, a system, a great visibility system, but there were no takers, there were no users. And the demand planning, supply planning, customer logistics, warehousing, transportation, these functions continue to do processes the way they were used to, go into SAP, pull data, use their spreadsheets for their analytics and decision making. And that taught me a big lesson that it's not the technology that is important, but it's really how the people, the processes, and the technology all fit in together. I think it was a good lesson for me at the end of it, and which I am able to now tell as a story. But it is a fact that people think, or companies think, that to digitize is just about bringing on newer technologies into their environment. Not really. It's about how those people and how the business process at the end of it, the outcome of how the people and the technology come together to enable the business process. So that would be one big learning through my career journey.
The adoption. So how much do you adopt, and training goes a long way. I always like to end with this question. I'll start with you, Satya. So, what book are you reading right now?
If you asked me a few years back, I would give you a name, but honestly, I'm not much of a reader nowadays. So my only reasoning for this is that, I mean, I do listen to podcasts and I do ideate and think, and not to say that my thinking and ideation has paused, but to say when I read a book, I'm very conditioned by the view of the author. And so to speak, I possibly limit myself, just like a horse is with its eyes covered, just to see what the road ahead is. So I don't read as much as I used to, but that has helped me open up my mind and to form my own journey path of what the truth is. And it's helped me come up with solutions that would be considered out of the box.
Thank you, Satya. And Ed, what book are you reading?
So I knew this was coming, so I thought about it, and I'm kind of going through a Napoleonic Wars phase right now, which sounds a little weird, but two books that recently I've been kind of going through again are Waterloo by Bernard Cornwell and Vienna 1814 by a guy named David King. And neither one is particularly new. And I don't know that either one contains a ton of business lessons, but I will say the Congress of Vienna sounded like it was a really good time. I'm sure everybody smelled bad, but they seemed to have had a lot of fun. And mostly I'm fascinated by that period in history, Western history, from 1776 to the end of World War I was kind of the beginning of the end of monarchism. And when you look in the scope of human history, it was always the rule of the big man. And that lasted, 10,000 years. And it may take us another 1,000 years as a species to figure out what we're going to do next. If we move away from the rule of the big man, what's next, right? And I'm fascinated by that idea because I think we're in this weird time in our history where the old way doesn't make sense anymore, but the new way hasn't yet emerged. And so it's fascinating. It's a fascinating time to me. I try to keep a larger perspective on things. And I will also just mention, because I agree with Satya, I do a lot more podcasts than I do books these days. And as far as the business stuff goes, I'd recommend the A16Z podcast. It's something that Andreessen Horowitz puts out. And it's really tech and future focused. And the people that work for Andreessen Horowitz are scary smart, and the people they invest in are even smarter. And I also am listening to a thing from a couple of eggheads at the University of Chicago called Capital Isn't. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, but I also worry that we haven't quite figured out, again, how we're going to divvy things up. And the financialization of our economy is kind of doing some weird things to our incentives and who gets rewarded. And how we assess value. I just think we haven't figured out how we assess that value, and redistributing wealth is not something that works real good. I don't think we've got a really good hold on that. And, for how long in human history did upper body strength, was that the most valuable thing that you could bring to work, right? And that's gone, right? And now we're saying, okay, well, the knowledge and wisdom is the most important thing you can bring. Well, apparently machines do that better too. So what are we going to do with ourselves? And I just don't think we have creative ideas about what comes next. And I'm fascinated by it, but I'd love to see more creative thinking in terms of just how we're going to work and how we're going to assess value in the economy in the future. Sorry for a long answer.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think you're thinking and working on very, very interesting problems. I think these are great problems to solve. Thank you so much. And I am actually reading a book written in 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. I think that's a great book, which I'm reading. And thanks for your podcast recommendations as well. I just want to say thank you to both of you. I really enjoyed this conversation. There was a lot of learning for me in terms of, it's not about the technology, it's about the adoption. So it was great, Satya. So thanks for that. And thank you so much, Ed, for your words of wisdom. We learned a ton about NAED, what it does, and not just that. I really love the problems you're working on. or even you're thinking about in terms of public policy. I feel there's a lot to be done there. And also, I love the phase in history you talked about, and I'm also curious on what's next. So thanks so much, Ed, and thank you, Satya. Thanks for joining me on the Driven Show.
Thanks for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Driven Podcast. Check out our other episodes for more and subscribe to be the first to access every new episode.